Hello and welcome to another edition of another book review. This week I'll be reviewing Sleepless in Hollywood by Lynda Obst, I believe is how her last name is pronounced. I'll go very briefly over the author's background, give an overview of what the book's about, talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I will be reading for next time. Lynda Obst is a Hollywood producer. She was an executive producer on Sleepless in Seattle was probably her biggest movie. She was also a producer of, which is where the title of the book comes from. She was also a producer on Interstellar a couple years back, doing some television work, but has worked in Hollywood since really the 80s. And what this book is her look at how the movie business has changed since she started. I think in the mid 80s is when she started producing. She was, I think, a junior assistant producer on Flashdance to give you a sense of how long she's been in the business and walked. And she has a kind of behind the scenes or business view of how the business works. And the book is not really so much about like um, a tell all about Hollywood and actors and directors and things of that nature. It's not really that book. What the book is really more about how her job as a producer has changed and how it's become more difficult to make movies that we would call, mid-budget romantic comedies and dramas, which were the movies that kind of brought her into the business that had her kind of her bread and butter in the 80s, and how at the beginning of really the century, the year 2000, 2001, in that kind of 2001 to about 2008 is the period where she notes that things have really changed in the business, and she has a whole series of reasons of why that is. And I thought that was really the most interesting part of the book, is really her look at how the business has changed and why it's changed and the factors that have caused the business to change. And she breaks that down numerically in a way that I thought was really interesting. I felt the other part of the book that's kind of the other half is really her story of how her life in the business over the past, I'd say, 10 years. This book came out in 2013, so it's a little bit dated in some of the information, but I think the general um, guidelines or the general guideposts of the business really still hold true. She looks at how the need to capture an international audience as more and more movie studios have become conglomerations and part of a broader network of entertainment content providers. There's been a larger and larger push to have growth at almost all costs, and so the growth is truly in international business. She looks at the box office budget or the box office gross for a big budget movie like Avengers or Top Gun or whatever it is. Avatar for sure, it's like 70% comes from international business. So the idea of targeting these movies strictly to an American audience is a luxury that many um, movie studios don't want to do. She had kind of a catbird seat to be in the Paramount lot as this kind of what she calls the new abnormal took over, where there's a push for more and more IP driven stuff, and why the IP driven work is considered to be a safe bet. She talks about kind of the death of movie stars. She talks about the growth in streaming, the growth in television, why there's kind of a brain drain from television, from the movies to television. She talks a little bit about the writer's strike, and I think this was 2008, 2009, which is not really something I'd thought about much since that happened. But she talks about how that also was an opportunity for many of the studios to cut dead wood, get rid of dead weight, these kind of really high line item contracts that were tying up the studios, that they were able to get rid of because of some of the writers striking. So it's a really interesting view if you've ever thought about, not really thought about why the movies that are made. That's really what the book tries to answer. She kind of talks about, she does this interesting thing where she separates demographically. Obviously, there's more demographics in this, but she basically separates four types of moviegoers: the young men, young women, older men, and she assigns them different types of pies in a way that I thought was really fun. And she um, goes through what would make a movie a two quadrant movie, a three quadrant movie, or what they call a four quadrant movie. If you think young men, young women, older men, older women, So what makes a four quadrant movie four quadrants? So I thought it was a really interesting look at the business and how in the past there was maybe more of a tolerance for risk that's really been mitigated um, as these companies have kind of chosen to greenlight fewer and fewer projects, and as distribution has kind of moved off of the movie studios being the only game in town. I think she kind of struck a kind of hopefully optimistic tone at the end of the book. That since this book came out 10 years ago, I have less optimism now than I did after before reading this book that it's going to turn around, because you don't really see it ever returning to the old days. And whether or not you think that's a good idea or a bad idea, how much you care about movie theaters themselves, I think is really going to be person to person. But if you wanted to look at, if you were ever asking yourself, well, what were some of the factors that drove the movie business to change? I found this book to be really enjoyable and really readable. She has a couple of moments that were laugh out loud funny to me. She has a part where she talks about market research and goes into what a market research situation looks like and how that can affect a movie and the choices made by the director and the studio, how marketing works and how that ties into some of these things. So I thought all that was, I thought, really interesting. She covers a couple of really famous ad campaigns that were really effective. Um, there's a part where she kind of imagines a market research or a focus group talking about Gone with the Wind, the movie Gone with the Wind, that I thought was really fun. There are things that I didn't like about as much. I didn't care for as much kind of her personal story through the Paramount lot and how her relationship with all these folks. The book is kind of half that and half business. And I was much more interested in the business side of things than really the upheaval with the studio and kind of this revolving door at the studio as people came in and got fired very quickly, and there's a sense of dislocation there. I wasn't as interested in that part of the book. I also think that her writing style, there's a lot of um, there's a lot of sentences and words that she uses that aren't in common use. And so I don't know if they're anachronistic or it's just a cultural thing. There are some times where I was reading what she wrote, I had to read it two or three times to really understand it. She writes in a very informal style, and um, it made it difficult to read sometimes. It's not really an essay necessarily, it's almost like someone telling you a story. And some of the times I had to read it two or three times to really get it. And some people are going to jibe with her voice and some people are not. And so it's really just, hopefully there's enough there for you to like without having to need to love her voice if you didn't like the authorial voice in the book. But overall, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It gave me a lot to think about as far as how these special effects were one of the culprits. I always kind of tie the end of the old way. She has this term called the new abnormal and the old abnormal. So the new abnormal is kind of these IP driven tentpole movies, tentpoles all the time, and it's just you've kind of bifurcated movies into super tentpoles and like very micro budget indies, so almost your A24s or your Neons of the world, and then your superhero movies, and they've kind of bifurcated where there's not a lot left in the middle. If you want to make, a drama, a comedy, historical drama, the budgets for those things seem to be dwindling. And she talks about the loss of the DVD market and how that played a major role in this. And so the cost of special effects and just the arms race there. So it just kind of goes through a whole list of stuff that if you're someone from the outside who hasn't thought about much about the business of Hollywood and how content gets to people that you may not have thought about, and I thought it was a very clear way of looking at that. The personal stuff, you may like that side of it more or less than I did, but that's certainly a part of the book too, of her personal story through Hollywood. I don't know what she has done in the last 10 years. I haven't had a chance to look her up on the line online to see if there's been anything since Interstellar. That was the last producing credit I saw that she had, and that was 2014. So I'm not sure if she's still an active producer or not, but I did enjoy the book Sleepless in Hollywood. I recommend to anybody who's interested in kind of the business side of Hollywood, where kind of you get a sense from this book of where things are going. Like I said, this book came out in 2013. I think everything in the book is still true, and nothing has really changed since this time. It's kind of been more of the same since then. So Sleepless in Hollywood, Lynda Obst. Next time, I'm going to be reading as a recommendation from one of um, my subscribers, Quentin Tarantino. We're going to stay on the movie side of cinema speculation. So look forward to that. Until next time, please, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll leave my Twitter link below. Until next time, bye.